The council chamber of the Kethavar hegemony stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls displaying the swirling colors of distant galaxies. Elder Zeftos stood before the assembled representatives of 47 star systems, his elongated fingers tracing patterns in the air as holographic displays materialized around him. Honored members. His voice resonated through translation matrices that carried meaning rather than words. We face a decision that will define our legacy among the stars. The displays shifted, showing a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, the 3rd planet of system designation Sol 1. The species calls it Earth. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Council member Velnari of the Outer Rim territories leaned forward, her crystalline features catching the light. Another primitive world, Elder. Surely the survey teams can handle standard observation protocols. Zeftos gestured, and the hologram zoomed closer to Earth's surface. Images flickered past. Humans wielding crude metal weapons, cities burning, bodies lying in fields ravaged by disease. Children starving while others lived in excess. Wars fought over invisible lines drawn on maps. These creatures, Council member Threndok spoke with disgust coloring his harmonic tones. They wage war upon their own kind. They poison their own nest. They divide themselves by the color of their skin, the shape of their features, the words they speak to their gods. Yes, Zeftos acknowledged. They are violent. They are wasteful. They seem incapable of learning from their mistakes. He paused, letting the images continue. And yet, the display changed. Now it showed humans pulling others from burning buildings, strangers sharing food with the hungry, parents sacrificing everything for their children, artists creating beauty in the midst of chaos, scientists working to cure diseases that plagued their people. They also show remarkable capacity for growth, Zeftos continued. In the span of mere centuries, they have advanced from crude stone tools to complex mathematics. They have built structures that rival natural mountains. Most importantly, they have begun to question their own nature. Council member Kreshita of the military directorate stood, her form radiating skepticism. Elder, with respect, we have observed thousands of species. Most follow predictable patterns. The violent ones typically destroy themselves or must be contained. These humans show classic signs of self-destructive behavior. Do they? Zeftos challenged. Or do they show signs of a species struggling to evolve beyond its primitive instincts? He gestured again and new images appeared. Watch this. The hologram displayed a human settlement during what their history would call the Bronze Age. A group of humans approached another tribe, weapons raised. But instead of attacking, they began to speak. Trade followed. Knowledge was exchanged. Children played together while their parents negotiated. They are learning to cooperate, Zeftos observed. Slowly and efficiently with frequent setbacks, but they are learning. The question before us is whether we have the patience to allow this learning to continue naturally, or whether we have the wisdom to offer guidance. Velnari's tone carried warning. The guidance protocols exist for good reason. Elder, direct intervention in pre-space civilizations has led to dependency at best, catastrophic cultural collapse at worst. I do not suggest direct contact, Zeftos replied. I suggest mercy. The chamber fell silent. In Kethavar culture, mercy was not merely kindness but the highest form of wisdom. The recognition that preservation of potential often required intervention without acknowledgement. Threndok broke the silence. What manner of mercy do you propose for these humans? Zeftos began to pace, his movements graceful despite his age. Our scientists have detected several extinction-level threats approaching their world. A plague that will emerge within decades, caused by microscopic organisms they cannot yet see. An asteroid on a collision course with their planet in approximately 2 centuries. Solar fluctuations that will disrupt their climate systems. Natural selection, Kreshita stated bluntly. If they cannot survive these challenges, perhaps they are not meant to. Perhaps, Zeftos agreed. But consider what we might lose. These humans possess something remarkable. They create beauty even in suffering. They hope even when logic suggests despair. They love even when it brings them pain. Is this not worth preserving? He gestured once more, and the display showed human art, music, literature, stories of heroes who sacrificed everything for others, songs that captured the longing of the heart, paintings that somehow made the ordinary seem magnificent. They dream of touching the stars, Zeftos said softly. Who are we to deny them the chance to try? The debate continued for hours. Some argued that intervention would rob humanity of authentic development. Others insisted that a species so violent could never be trusted with advanced technology. Still others suggested that extinction might be humanity's natural fate. But gradually, Zeftos won supporters. The humans' capacity for both creation and destruction fascinated many council members. Their resilience in the face of suffering impressed others. Most compelling was their evident struggle to become better than they were. When the vote was called, it was closer than any in recent memory. 24 systems voted for intervention. 20 voted against. 3 abstained. The motion carries, announced the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had joined the hegemony millennia ago. What form shall this mercy take? Zeftos had prepared for this moment. We guide without revealing ourselves. We prevent the plague by ensuring their scholars discover certain principles of cleanliness and medicine slightly earlier than they might naturally. We deflect the asteroid using gravitational manipulation that will appear to be natural stellar mechanics. We stabilize their climate by adjusting solar output in ways their instruments cannot detect. And if they develop in directions we find troubling? Kreshta demanded. Then we will face that choice when it comes, Zeftos replied. But I believe as I hope that given time and opportunity they will surprise us. The intervention began immediately. Cathavar agents, cloaked in technology that bent light and thought around them, walked among humans without being detected. They whispered inspirations to inventors, guided crucial discoveries, and subtly influenced key historical moments. When the Great Plague struck, humanity was prepared. Not fully, or many still died, but enough survived to rebuild. When scholars began to understand disease, they found the knowledge somehow easier to grasp than expected. The asteroid, large enough to end civilization, passed harmlessly by Earth after what human astronomers would later call an unexpected gravitational anomaly. Climate disasters that should have driven humanity to extinction instead became challenges they overcame, often through innovations that seemed to emerge just when needed most. For centuries, the Kethvar watched and guided. They saw humanity spread across their planet, develop agriculture, build cities, create art, and slowly, gradually, learn to resolve conflicts through means other than violence. They are succeeding beyond our hopes, Velnari reported to the council. Their technology advances steadily. Their philosophical understanding deepens. Most remarkably, they have begun to consider the welfare of their entire species, not just their local tribes. Zeftos, now even more ancient but still sharp, felt vindicated. The mercy was justified. When they achieve spaceflight, perhaps in another few centuries and now, they will be ready to join the galactic community as partners, not subjects. The Kethavar gradually withdrew their direct influence, leaving only monitoring stations hidden throughout the Sol system. They would wait until humanity naturally developed faster than light travel, then make contact. The grateful humans would learn of their benefactor's role in their survival and development. Together they would build a better galaxy. It was a beautiful plan. It was logical, compassionate, and wise. It was also completely wrong about human nature. When contact finally came, it would not unfold as the Kethvar expected. The mercy they had granted with such careful thought would be interpreted through human eyes, human values, human pride, and that interpretation would reshape the galaxy in ways none of them could have imagined. But for now, the Kethvar felt satisfied. They had saved a species and would soon gain grateful allies. They had no idea they had created something far more dangerous than the primitive humans they remembered. Captain Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the observation deck's viewport, watching Jupiter's great red spot swirl beneath them. The UES Defiance, humanity's most advanced exploration vessel, had been conducting routine surveys of the outer solar system when their sensors detected the anomaly. "Still can't believe we missed it for 300 years, muttered Lieutenant Commander Martinez, standing beside her. "A structure that size hiding behind Europa's gravitational shadow," Sarah nodded grimly. The object was clearly artificial. A crystalline spire nearly 5 kilometers long, gracefully curved and emanating energy signatures that made their instruments dance with readings they had never seen before. After 60 hours of cautious approach, they had confirmed what everyone hoped and feared. Humanity was not alone. "Captain," Communications Officer Park called from her station, We're receiving a transmission. It's in English, Sarah spun around. What? Perfect English, ma'am. And the signal is adapting to our communication protocols in real time. Should I put it through? Sarah felt her heart racing. First contact protocols required caution, but they also required courage. Put it on speakers. The voice that filled the bridge was melodious, carrying harmonics that seemed almost musical. Greetings, humans of the vessel Defiance. I am Captain Velnari of the HFY monitoring station Patience and Wisdom. We have waited long for this moment. Sarah exchanged glances with her crew. Waited? This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. Your presence in our solar system was unknown to us until recently. This is understandable, came the reply. We have remained hidden by choice observing your remarkable development. With your permission, I would like to invite you aboard our station. There is much we need to discuss. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in an airlock that sparkled like the inside of a geode. The HFY station was beautiful beyond description. Our walls that seemed to grow rather than be built, corridors that curved in impossible ways, and everywhere a sense of age and wisdom that made humanity's achievements feel like a child's first drawings. Captain Velnari was tall and graceful, her features sharp and angular in a way that seemed almost crystalline. Her skin held a faint luminescence, and her eyes were large and dark, holding depths that suggested centuries of experience. Welcome, Captain Chen, Velnari said. Her voice no longer filtered through translation technology. You are the first human to set foot aboard a HFY vessel. This is a historic moment. Sarah tried to maintain diplomatic composure while her mind reeled. How long have you been watching us? Approximately 800 of your years, Velnari replied, gesturing for Sarah to follow her deeper into the station. Since your species began to show true promise for technological advancement. They entered a vast chamber with transparent walls that offered a stunning view of Jupiter and its moons. Velnari activated a holographic display that showed Earth throughout history, but not the history Sarah knew. We have observed your growth with great interest, Velnari continued. Your species has overcome challenges that have destroyed others. The Great Plague of the 14th century, the climate catastrophes of the 16th, the asteroid that passed your world in 1847. Sarah frowned. Asteroid? I'm not familiar with any asteroid event in 1847. Velnari paused, her expression shifting slightly. Ah, perhaps your historians have not preserved those records. It was a near miss. Show me, Sarah said. The hologram changed, displaying Earth in the 19th century. Sarah watched an asteroid the size of a mountain approach Earth, then inexplicably alter course and speed away. That object should have struck your planet, Velnari explained. The impact would have ended your civilization, but gravitational anomalies caused it to miss. Gravitational anomalies, Sarah repeated slowly. Those don't just happen. No, Velnari agreed. They do not. The understanding hit Sarah like a physical blow. You interfered. We helped, Velnari corrected. Your species showed such potential, but you faced extinction through no fault of your own. We guided certain events to ensure your survival. Sarah stared at the display, pieces falling into place. The plague resistance that developed so quickly, the agricultural innovations that ended famines, the scientific breakthroughs that came just when we needed them most. Yes. Velnari seemed pleased that Sarah understood. We have watched over you, protected you, guided your development. Your species owes its survival to the mercy of the HFY hegemony. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt something cold and terrible growing in her chest, not gratitude, but a profound sense of violation. You manipulated our entire history, she said quietly. Velnari tilted her head, confused by Sarah's tone. We preserved your species from extinction. We ensured your advancement. You should be grateful. Grateful? Sarah's voice rose. Every struggle we thought we'd overcome, every triumph we celebrated, every innovation we were proud of, you were pulling the strings? We were ensuring your survival. You were treating us like pets, Sarah exploded, like children who couldn't take care of themselves. Velnari stepped back, clearly startled. Captain Chen, I understand this news is overwhelming, but surely you must appreciate it. What I appreciate, Sarah cut her off, is knowing the truth. What I don't appreciate is having my species' entire history turned into a lie. It was not a lie, Velnari protested. Your achievements are real. Your growth is genuine. We merely prevented certain extinction events by deciding for us that we couldn't handle them ourselves. Sarah began pacing, her movements sharp and angry. Did it ever occur to you that maybe those challenges were meant to be faced? That maybe overcoming them on our own was important? Your species would have died, Velnari said firmly. The asteroid alone, maybe we would have found a way. Maybe we would have died trying. But it should have been our choice to make. Sarah stopped pacing and faced the alien captain directly. Every human who lived because of your intervention, every technological advance you guided, every disaster you prevented, none of it was earned. It was given to us like treats to a well-behaved dog. Velnari's luminescence flickered. I do not understand your anger. We saved your species. We nurtured your development. We prepared you for this moment when you would be ready to join the galactic community. Join it as what? As your grateful dependents? As the species that needed cosmic babysitting to survive? Sarah shook her head. You didn't save us, Captain. You robbed us. Robbed you of what? Of knowing who we really are. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. Of knowing what we're truly capable of. Of the right to succeed or fail on our own merits. For long moments they stared at each other across a gulf of incomprehension. Velnari represented a species that viewed mercy as the highest virtue, that saw protection of the weak as a moral imperative. Sarah represented a species that valued independence above safety, that would rather face extinction with dignity than accept survival as a gift. Perhaps, Velnari said carefully, you need time to process this information. The revelation of our existence is significant enough without a... No, Sarah interrupted. I understand perfectly. You've made your position clear. She straightened, falling into the formal posture she used for official communications. Captain Velnari, I want you to understand something about humans. We don't like being managed. We don't like being protected without our knowledge or consent. And we especially don't like discovering that our entire civilization is built on someone else's charity. It was not charity, Velnari insisted. It was wisdom. It was mercy, Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. From where I stand, Captain, your mercy looks a lot like contempt. You saw a species too primitive to survive on its own, so you decided to keep us as pets. Well, congratulations. Your pets just learned how to bite. The meeting ended shortly after, with both captains maintaining diplomatic courtesy while tension filled the air like a charged field. Sarah returned to the Defiance with her crew, her mind already racing with implications and plans. Orders, Captain? Martinez asked as they reached their ship. Sarah stood in the airlock looking back at the HFY station one last time. Set course for Earth, maximum burn. Ma'am? We have a species to warn, Sarah said grimly, and preparations to make. As the Defiance pulled away from the station, Velnari watched from her observation deck, troubled by the humans' response. She had expected gratitude, wonder, perhaps even awe. Instead, she had encountered anger, and what seemed like injured pride. She activated her communication array and sent a priority message to the HFY hegemony. First contact with humans has been established. Initial response was not as anticipated. Request guidance on how to proceed. The response would take days to arrive across interstellar distances. In those days, the news would reach Earth, and humanity would learn the truth about their history. The galaxy was about to discover that there were worse things than an ungrateful species. There were species that considered gratitude an insult. The emergency session of the United Earth Council convened within 6 hours of the Defiance's return. Representatives from every nation, colony, and orbital station filled the chamber in Geneva, their faces displaying the same mixture of shock, anger, and determination that had gripped humanity since Captain Chen's report reached Earth. Secretary General Maria Santos stood before the assembly, her usually calm demeanor strained. The evidence is undeniable. For 8 centuries, our development has been guided by an alien species that considered us incapable of surviving, without their intervention. The chamber erupted in angry voices speaking dozens of languages. Santos raised her hand for silence, but it took several minutes before order returned. The question before us, she continued, is how we respond to this revelation. Admiral Richardson of the Earth Defense Forces rose from his seat. The question, Madam Secretary, is whether we're going to remain their pet project or assert our independence as a species. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Council's chief historian, activated a holographic display showing Earth's timeline. Every major advancement, every narrowly avoided catastrophe, every breakthrough that seemed too convenient, they're all connected. The discovery of antibiotics came 50 years early. The agricultural revolution that ended the Bengal famine, the asteroid that missed us in 1847, even the computer revolution, as our mathematical foundations were influenced by their subtle manipulations. So what? Demanded Representative Kim from the Korean Republic. People lived who would have died. Civilizations survived that would have fallen. Are we supposed to be angry about that? Yes, said Captain Chen, who had been invited to address the council. Because every life they saved, every civilization they preserved was decided by them, not us. They played God with our species, and we never had a choice in the matter. But if they hadn't intervened, Kim began. Then we would have faced those challenges on our own terms. Chen interrupted. Maybe we would have failed. Maybe billions would have died. But they would have been our failures, our sacrifices, our choices. Instead, we're living a lie, ours a carefully constructed fairy tale where humanity always finds a way. Because invisible puppeteers were pulling our strings. The debate raged for hours. Some argued for gratitude, or as the HFY had, after all, prevented humanity's extinction. Others demanded answers about what other aspects of human development had been manipulated. A vocal minority called for immediate retaliation. Senator Williams from the North American Federation stood slowly, his weathered face grave. I've lived through 97 years of human history. I've seen us overcome impossible odds, achieve miraculous breakthroughs, and somehow always find hope when everything seemed lost. Now I discover it was all an illusion, that our greatest triumphs were nothing more than alien charity. He paused, looking around the chamber. My grandfather died in the climate wars of 2157, believing he was fighting for humanity's future. My daughter devoted her life to developing clean fusion technology, thinking she was saving our world. Were their sacrifices meaningless?
Were their achievements hollow?
No, Chen replied firmly. Their intentions were real. Their efforts were genuine, but their successes were predetermined by forces they never knew existed. And that makes all the difference. The vote, when it finally came, was overwhelming. 412 votes for independence, 87 for continued cooperation, and 51 abstentions. Humanity had chosen defiance over gratitude. The response was swift and unprecedented. Every major government began emergency military appropriations. Scientific research shifted overnight to focus on technologies that could challenge HFY advantages. Most importantly, humanity began preparing for a war they had never imagined fighting. Captain Chen found herself promoted to admiral and placed in charge of the newly created Autonomous Development Initiative. Her mission was simple in concept but staggering in scope. Prepare humanity to stand alone in the galaxy. Show me what we're working with, she told her staff officers during their first briefing aboard the orbital shipyard, Prometheus Station. The reports were sobering. Human technology, while impressive by the standards of a naturally developing species, was centuries behind what the HFY possessed. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, their defensive systems nearly impenetrable. On the positive side, reported Chief Engineer Park, we've managed to analyze some energy signatures from their station. Their technology operates on principles we understand, even if we can't match their implementation yet. How long to close the gap? Chen asked. Honestly, never, Park admitted. They've had millennia to develop their technology. We've had months. Then we don't try to match them, Chen said. We become something they can't predict. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. The HFY ambassador had arrived. Ambassador, Kethmal materialized in the center of the UN Assembly Chamber, his form shimmering as molecular transporters deposited him directly from his ship. The gasps and murmurs from the representatives showed that his dramatic entrance had the desired effect. He was magnificent, 3 meters tall, with features that seemed carved from living crystal, and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonic overtones that suggested vast intelligence and benevolent authority. Honored leaders of humanity, he began, I come before you in the spirit of reconciliation and understanding. We are aware that our revelation has caused distress among your people. Secretary General Santos stepped forward. Ambassador, humanity appreciates the HFY hegemonies. assistance throughout our history. However, we have questions about the nature and extent of that assistance. Kethmal nodded graciously. Of course. You have discovered that your development has been guided by our wisdom. This is natural and proper. Elder species have always nurtured younger ones toward maturity. Guided, Santos repeated. That's an interesting word choice. Yes, Kethmal confirmed. For 8 centuries, we have carefully prevented your species from destroying itself, while allowing your natural growth to proceed. We prevented a dozen extinction events, subtly influenced key discoveries, and prepared you for eventual integration into the galactic community. Without our knowledge or consent, Santos pointed out. Kethmal seemed puzzled by her tone. Would you ask a parent to seek consent from a child before preventing it from walking into traffic? We acted to preserve and nurture your species until you reached sufficient maturity to understand our actions. And now that we understand, Santos said carefully, what exactly do you expect from us? Gratitude would be appropriate, Kethmal replied. Recognition of the debt your species owes to Kethvar wisdom. Most importantly, acceptance of your place in the galactic order. The chamber fell silent. Santos felt the weight of human history, human pride, and human independence pressing down on her shoulders. Ambassador, she said slowly, I'm afraid there's been a fundamental misunderstanding. How so? You seem to believe that humanity should be grateful for your intervention in our development. You seem to expect us to accept a subordinate position based on that intervention, and you seem to think we consider ourselves your children rather than your equals. Kethmal's expression shifted slightly. You are not our equals, Secretary General. Your species has existed for mere millennia. You have barely begun to explore your own solar system. Your technology is primitive. Your social structure's crude, your understanding of the universe limited. The gap between our species is vast. Was vast, Santos corrected. Past tense. I do not understand. Santos smiled, but there was steel in her expression. The gap was vast when you first found us. It remained vast while you guided our development in secret. But the moment you revealed yourselves, Ambassador, you made a critical error. What error? You gave us something to prove. Santos gestured to her fellow representatives, to the watching cameras that carried her words across human space. For 8 centuries, we thought we were alone in the universe, struggling to survive and advance through our own efforts. Now we discover we were never alone, never truly struggling, never truly advancing on our own merits. Yes, Kethmal said, still not understanding. We provided the guidance you needed at birth. You provided a crutch we never asked for, Santos interrupted. And now we're going to show you what humans can accomplish when we know we're not alone, when we know there are others who consider us inferior, when we know that everything we achieve has to be genuinely ours. Kethmal's luminescence flickered. Secretary General, you cannot be suggesting I'm not suggesting anything, Ambassador. I'm telling you. Santos straightened, her voice carrying the authority of speaking for an entire species. Humanity rejects your guidance. We reject your protection. We reject your assumption that we need or want your continued involvement in our development. This is unwise, Kethmal warned. Your species faces challenges you cannot imagine. Without our guidance, we'll face them ourselves, Santos said firmly, as we should have been allowed to do from the beginning. The ambassador's form began to shimmer again. You are making a grave mistake. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. There are forces that would destroy your species without thought. You need our protection. What we need, Santos replied, is the right to succeed or fail on our own terms. What we need is the respect due to a sapient species capable of making its own choices. What we and Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display as Kethvar battle groups moved through the Proxima Centauri system like schools of luminescent fish. Their ships were beautiful as organic curves that seemed grown rather than built, hulls that shifted color with their thoughts, weapons that converted matter into pure energy with elegant efficiency. They were also about to die. All squadrons report ready, announced Commander Martinez from the tactical station. Operation Ingratitude is green for execution. Chen allowed herself a bitter smile at the operation name. 18 months of war had taught humanity many things, but perhaps the most important was that the Kethvar had never fought an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Initiate Phase 1, she ordered. On the display, what appeared to be a minor asteroid belt suddenly came alive. Hundreds of chunks of rock began accelerating toward the Kethvar fleet. But these weren't random debris. They were carefully shaped kinetic projectiles, each one guided by primitive but effective AI systems. The Kethvar responded exactly as their doctrine demanded. Their point defense systems activated, precisely targeting and destroying the incoming projectiles with controlled bursts of directed energy. It was textbook fleet defense, executed with the kind of perfection that came from millennia of experience. It was also exactly what Chen had counted on. Phase 2, she commanded. Hidden among the kinetic projectiles were smaller objects, so not weapons, but sophisticated sensor packages that had recorded every detail of the Kethvar defensive systems. As the point defense grid fired, the sensors transmitted targeting data back to concealed human forces throughout the system. Captain Velnari, commanding the Kethvar task force, realized what was happening just as the real attack began. "Clever," she transmitted to her fleet. "They used our own precision against us. Adjust defensive parameters and RO." Her words were cut off as space around the Kethvar fleet suddenly filled with human vessels that hadn't been there moments before. But these weren't traditional starships. They were converted cargo haulers, mining platforms, even civilian transports, all retrofitted with military systems and operated by crews who had trained for exactly this scenario. "Impossible," breathed Velnari's tactical officer. "How did they approach without detection?" They didn't approach, Velnari realized with growing alarm. They were already here. For months, human merchant vessels had been moving through Kethvar space, ostensibly conducting trade with neutral worlds. The Kethvar had monitored them carefully, but had seen no threat in ships that appeared to carry nothing more dangerous than agricultural products and consumer goods. Now those same ships revealed their true nature. Cargo holds open to disgorge swarms of fighter craft. Grain silos transformed into missile launchers. Passenger compartments became barracks for boarding parties, equipped with weapons reverse-engineered from captured Kethvar technology. But it wasn't just the surprise that devastated the Kethvar fleet, it was the tactics. Where Kethvar doctrine emphasized elegant formations and coordinated attacks, humans fought like a pack of wolves. They swarmed individual targets using overwhelming numbers to compensate for inferior firepower. They rammed damaged ships into healthy ones, turning every casualty into a potential weapon. Most disturbing of all, they adapted faster than any enemy the Kethvar had ever faced. "Their formation is shifting," reported Velnari's sensor officer. "They're responding to our counter-maneuvers in real time." "Of course they are," Velnari said grimly. "Each of those ships has an independent command structure. They're not following a battle plan, they're improvising." As she watched, a human destroyer took catastrophic damage from a Kethvar heavy cruiser. Instead of retreating, the destroyer accelerated directly toward its attacker. The cruiser's captain, following standard doctrine, targeted the destroyer's engine core to prevent ramming. The destroyer's engines exploded as intended. But the explosion was carefully shaped, turning the ship into a massive directed energy weapon. The heavy cruiser's shields, designed to repel incoming fire, were useless against an attack that originated from within their defensive perimeter. "Status report," Velnari demanded as her flagship shuddered under human attack. 7 ships destroyed. 12 heavily damaged, came the reply. "Humans' losses are difficult to assess. They're using damaged vessels as weapons." "Order full retreat," Velnari commanded. "We need to regroup and our—" "Ma'am," interrupted her communications officer. "I'm detecting human transmissions throughout the system. They're not random, Chatteru. It's coordinated data sharing." Velnari felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature on her bridge. "Show me." The tactical display revealed the true scope of human preparation. Every civilian installation in the system, more Nwandra mining stations, agricultural platforms, research outposts, was transmitting tactical data to the human fleet. They had turned the entire star system into a sensor network, providing their military forces with perfect situational awareness. "They've been preparing for this war since the moment we revealed ourselves," Velnari realized. Every trade mission, every civilian convoy, every cultural exchange on, they were gathering intelligence and positioning assets. The retreat became a rout. Human forces didn't just pursue the fleeing Kethvar ships, they anticipated their destinations. Mining charges detonated along hyperspace routes. Cargo containers filled with debris created obstacles at jump points. Even the retreat had been planned for and prepared against. By the time Velnari's battered task force reached Kethvar space, She had lost 23 ships to an enemy that had started the war with inferior technology and no formal military doctrine. The pattern repeated across the galaxy. At Rigel, human forces used the system's binary stars as gravitational slingshots, accelerating their ships to velocities that strained both hulls and crews to the breaking point. At Vega, they hid an entire fleet in the system's asteroid belt, disguising their ships as mining operations until the moment of attack. But perhaps the most shocking development was how quickly human technology advanced during the war itself. Ships that entered combat with crude energy weapons emerged from single battles with systems that matched or exceeded Kethvar capabilities. Elder Zeftos, now leading the Kethvar war effort from the capital world of Synthesis, studied the reports with growing disbelief. How are they advancing so rapidly? They're learning from every engagement, reported Military Commander Kreshta. Each captured system provides them with more of our technology to study. But more than that, they're improving our designs. Improving them how? Kreshta activated a holographic display showing a human warship captured in the Battle of Wolf 359. This vessel began the engagement with standard kinetic weapons and basic shielding. By the time it was destroyed, it had modified its systems 3 times during the battle itself. During the battle? Yes, Elder. They're performing field modifications under combat conditions. They'll analyze our attacks, determine our weapons' frequencies and targeting algorithms, then adapt their defenses in real time. Zeftos stared at the display. But such modifications require careful calculation, testing, verification. Apparently not for humans, Kreshta interrupted. They seem willing to implement modifications that have a significant chance of failure, if those same modifications also have a chance of providing tactical advantage. That's madness. That's war. Corrected a new voice. Admiral Chen materialized in the center of the room. Her image transmitted across space by communication technologies that the Kethvar didn't recognize. Admiral Chen, Zeftos said, rising from his crystalline throne. I was not aware that humans had developed real-time interstellar communication. We didn't, Chen replied calmly. We stole yours, reverse-engineered it, and improved it. That seems to be our specialty these days. You cannot hope to win this war, Zeftos said. Our empire spans thousands of systems. Our technology has been refined over millennia. Your species has been in space for mere centuries. Your species has been in space for millennia, Chen agreed. But you've been fighting the same kinds of wars for just as long. We've been fighting for 18 months, and we're already better at it than you are. Arrogance will not save you when our full military might is deployed fighting a war you don't understand against an enemy you created. Chen interrupted. You spent 8 centuries making sure we never had to face extinction on our own. Well, congratulations. Now we're facing it with 800 years of pent-up evolutionary pressure behind us. Zeftos felt something he had never experienced before, doubt about Kethvar's superiority. What do you want? What we've always wanted, Chen replied. The right to succeed or fail on our own terms. The respect due to a sapient species. Recognition that we're not your children, your pets, or your responsibility. And if we grant this recognition, Chen's image smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Then you'll have learned the lesson we're trying to teach you, but I don't think you're ready for that yet. What lesson? That mercy without respect is just another form of cruelty, Chen said, and that humans remember cruelty. The synthesis system blazed with the light of 1,000 burning ships. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the UES Vindication, watching the final battle of the war unfold around the Kethvar homeworld. 3 years of conflict had led to this moment of our humanity's fleet, now numbering in the tens of thousands, facing the last organized resistance of an empire that had once spanned half the galaxy. Status report, she called out, her voice carrying the weariness of someone who had seen too much war. Kethvar defensive platforms are down to 60% operational capacity, reported her tactical officer. Their orbital shipyards have been neutralized. Remaining fleet elements are consolidating around the planet. Chen nodded, studying the tactical display. The battle had raged for 18 hours, and while human forces were winning, the cost had been devastating. Ships that had fought across dozens of star systems lay broken in space. Crews that had started the war believing in humanity's moral superiority now fought with the grim determination of those who had learned that survival sometimes required becoming something they didn't want to be. Admiral, came a transmission. From the surface, we're receiving a communication from Elder Zeftos. He's requesting personal combat to determine the outcome of the war. Chen felt a bitter laugh escape her lips. Even now, at the end of everything, the Kethvar clung to their ancient traditions. Personal combat? It's an old Kethvar custom, explained her cultural advisor, Dr. Reyes. Single combat between military leaders to settle disputes without further bloodshed. And if I refuse, then the battle continues until one side is completely destroyed. Chen looked around her bridge at the faces of officers who had followed her through hell. Many were barely out of their teens. The war had consumed the older generation of military leaders. They watched her with eyes that held too much knowledge of death and too little hope for peace. Set us down on the surface, she ordered. Send word to Elder Zeftos that I accept his challenge. 2 hours later, Chen found herself in a crystalline arena carved from the living rock of the Kethvar homeworld. The chamber was ancient, its walls decorated with the history of 1,000 different species that had been guided by Kethvar wisdom over the millennia. It was beautiful, serene, and utterly alien to everything Chen had learned about warfare. Elder Zeftos entered from the opposite side of the arena. Age had bent his crystalline frame, but his eyes still held the deep intelligence that had shaped galactic policy for centuries. In his hands he carried a weapon that looked more like a work of art than an instrument of war. Admiral Chen, he said, his voice echoing strangely in the vast chamber. You have brought much sorrow to the galaxy. Have I? Chen asked, checking. Her own weapon? A simple plasma rifle that had been upgraded with technology stolen from a dozen different Kethvar ships. Or have I simply revealed sorrows that were already there? We brought peace to the galaxy, Zeftos insisted. For millennia, we prevented conflicts, guided younger species away from self-destruction, maintained order among the stars. You prevented growth, Chen corrected. You guided species into dependency. You maintained order by ensuring that no one could challenge your authority. They began to circle each other, two representatives of civilizations that had never truly understood one another. Your species would have destroyed itself without our intervention, Zeftos said. The plague alone might have killed billions, Chen agreed. Or it might have taught us about disease and medicine centuries earlier. We'll never know, will we? Because you decided for us. We saved you. You saved a version of us that fit your idea of what we should be. Chen raised her weapon. But we were never meant to be your pets, Elder. We were meant to be ourselves, violent, unpredictable, independent. You tried to sand off our rough edges, and you created something worse than what you started with. The fight began with Zeftos moving with speed that belied his apparent age. His weapon fired bolts of coherent energy that could disintegrate matter at the molecular level. But Chen didn't fight like a Kethvar warrior. She fought like a human who had learned warfare in the crucible of a galactic conflict. She used the arena's architecture against him, ricocheting shots off crystalline walls. She moved unpredictably, abandoning tactical positions that any trained fighter would have held. Most importantly, she adapted her strategy with every exchange, learning from his attacks and modifying her own approach in real time. You fight without honor, Zeftos called out as Chen's shots forced him to take cover behind a decorative pillar. I fight to win, she replied, circling around to flank him. Honor is a luxury for species that don't face extinction. We never intended for you to face extinction. No, Chen agreed. You intended for us to face dependence, to always be the grateful children of wise parents, to never grow beyond your ability to control us. Her shot caught him in the shoulder, sending him spinning. He recovered quickly, but Chen could see that his movements were becoming labored. What did you think would happen? She continued, pressing her attack. Did you imagine we'd thank you for robbing us of our authentic history? Did you think we'd gratefully accept second-class status in your galactic community? We thought you would mature, Zeftos gasped, firing desperately as Chen closed the distance between them. We thought you would learn wisdom. We did learn wisdom, Chen said, dodging his shots with movements that were more improvisation than training. We learned that there are things worse than extinction. We learned that survival without dignity is just another form of death. Zeftos stumbled, his weapon falling from his hands. Chen's rifle was pointed at his head, her finger on the trigger. Around them, the arena fell silent. "You cannot win," he said quietly. "Even if you destroy our civilization, you will become something terrible in the process. You will become conquerors, oppressors. You will become everything you claim to despise about us." Chen studied his face, seeing in it the genuine confusion of someone who had never understood the consequences of his good intentions. "Maybe," she said finally, "but that will be our choice to make. Our mistake to live with. Our responsibility to bear." She stepped back, lowering her weapon. "I'm not going to kill you, Elder. Death is too easy, too final. Instead, you're going to live with the knowledge of what your mercy cost both our species." Zeftos stared at her in amazement. "You're sparing me?" "I'm granting you the same mercy you granted us," Chen replied. "I'm going to let you survive, but on my terms. Your empire is broken. Your military is defeated. Your technology has been surpassed. From now on, the HFY will exist at humanity's pleasure." "And what are your terms?" Chen smiled, but for the first time in years, there was something other than bitterness in the expression. "No terms, no guidance, no protection. You'll face the galaxy the same way every other species does. On your own merits, with your own strength, by your own choices. That's genuine mercy," Zeftos whispered. "Yes," Chen agreed. "It's the mercy you should have shown us from the beginning. The mercy of letting someone stand or fall on their own." She turned and walked toward the arena's exit, speaking over her shoulder. "Consider it a lesson in what respect actually looks like. The war ended not with the destruction of the HFY homeworld, but with their surrender. Treaties were signed, territories were redistributed, and the galaxy settled into a new order with humanity at its center. But the real change was subtler and more profound. Stories began to spread among the younger species, tales of how the humans had fought and won against impossible odds, how they had turned their benefactor's mercy into a weapon, how they had refused to accept charity disguised as guidance. The stories grew in the telling, becoming legends that warned against the dangers of underestimating any species that valued independence over safety. They became cautionary tales about the difference between mercy and respect, between protection and control. And at the center of every story was the same lesson. They granted humanity mercy once and were repaid with legend. The galaxy learned to approach younger species differently after that. Instead of guidance, they offered knowledge. Instead of protection, they offered alliance. Instead of mercy, they offered respect. Because everyone remembered what happened when humanity discovered that their entire civilization had been built on someone else's charity. Chen herself retired to a small colony world, where she spent her remaining years writing memoirs that would become required reading in military academies across human space. In her final entry, she wrote, "The HFY meant well. I believe that with all my heart. They saw a violent, chaotic species heading toward extinction, and they chose to intervene. They prevented our deaths, guided our development, and prepared us for a place in their galactic community. But they never asked us what we wanted. They never considered that we might prefer to face extinction with dignity rather than accept survival as charity. They never understood that for humans, how we achieve something matters as much as what we achieve. In the end, their mercy taught us that we were stronger than they ever imagined. Their protection showed us that we could stand alone. Their guidance proved that we could find our own way. Perhaps that's the real tragedy of our war, or not that we fought, but that it was necessary to fight in order to prove we were